Okay, let's clear the room. If you're leaving, leave. If you're staying, stay. Okay, Zachary comes to us from we're based in Australia, but he has this unique musical background which informs a lot of his work, and he's going to talk about work he's doing which is going to lead to publication next year on Greek theatre.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Michael. A bit of an apology. When I first wrote the abstract to this paper, I was thinking of doing a very real philosophical critique of why Stanislavski and Aristotle are usually mentioned in the same breath and appear in the same room when Greek tragedy is being rehearsed. I haven't been able to really go deep enough in that analysis, so I'm really going to stage the discussion today as a kind of provocation, perhaps, for future deeper work. I've also thought I rarely ever wear my practitioner's hat in an academic conference. I'm going to be quite vulnerable today and reveal actually some of the things that I do in studio. In fact, informs my academic work. I tend to sort of hide behind kind of the strong barriers of academic thinking. So that's what today is about, really more of a provocation towards the discussion of Greek tragedy in relevance to the discourses surrounding Stanislavski, which is actually missing, as in last year when I talked about musical theater and that discussion, and where is Stanislavski and all that. So here's the scene. A royal dispute. Oedipus accuses Creon of treason. The chorus, only one actor for budgetary reasons, tries to calm things down. Jocasta joins the affray. Instantly, the actors lose their way in a screaming match, which causes the director to call time out. Time to review tactics, get a sense of where the beats shift, clarify what their characters want. Round 2. The action seems to flow better, except the chorus, who stops, insisting he is not connecting. The director goes over what's at stake for an elder of Thebes. What's his loyalty to the city-state, to Jocasta, to Creon, to this young upstart from Corinth? Meanwhile, the actors playing Oedipus and Creon are pumping the air. They have this male thing going on with their stichomatheas. The director senses the chorus's annoyance and uses that emotion to jumpstart round 3. Everyone seems larger than life, but the scene falls apart when the chorus calls Oedipus a motherfucker and leaves the room. As the director runs after the chorus, the dramaturg, sitting on the side rather sphinx-like, produces her notes. She produces her notes. If I turn this on, it will work. Yeah. And says, the first thing you have to notice, she suggests, is the symmetrical text here. I know it's very dim. Down here, at the climax of the scene, which ring fences the actions of the chorus, Oedipus and Jocasta. Note too, she says, the journey of the chorus from the climax. A few minutes earlier, the chorus had just performed a remarkable meta-theatrical choral ode on criminality, on piety, on religious piety and loyalty. And the chorus has to travel down through this in sort of a very foreshortened emotional journey to arrive at this huge lament, the moment when everybody is actually singing on the same level. So the frustration of the chorus comes from such a foreshortened emotional journey. And this is where we're getting to at the end of this scene. The dramaturg reveals what's beneath this. It's a remnant of a comus, a dramatic device used in ancient Greek tragedy in which a conflict climaxes into song, where the semantics of speech loses its narrative traction and gives way to shared lament. The problem is the chorus is not just out of touch, but out of key. The actors, excited with this newfound knowledge, tells the director they ought to scale up the physical, the vocal exercises, but ignores them and resumes even more psychological techniques, as though Sophocles and Chekhov were writing in the same era, and Stanislavski and Strasbourg were the same Russians. The scenario, simplistic as this sounds, nonetheless provides us with a stage for a discussion. Why is it that from page to stage, Greek tragedy is primarily read as a kind of naturalistic psychological drama? And who wouldn't? What's on the surface of a Greek text, even in most modern adaptations, is the cut and thrust of dialogue, Shakespearean-sized monologues, universal archetypes, a plot of sorts, and stagecraft. And didn't Aristotle praise such dramatic components as the hallmark of good tragic play? And didn't Stanislavski provide us the tools with which to enact such dramatic components? Psychological analysis, as useful to rehearsals as to lit classes, are nonetheless challenged in relation to an ancient dramatic form which adamantly refuses the natural laws of time, space, and action, suddenly apparent messengers and ever-present courses being one of those glaring anomalies. Moreover, such beings tend to gloss over the residues of ancient song, dance, and rhythmic structures, and by doing so risk in fact shortchanging the holistic approach that psychophysical work is meant to generate. To stage such an argument, let's begin with the proposal that Greek tragedy is not just a text, that it is fundamentally a performance score. For us to contend such a thing, we need to briefly realign our reception of Aristotle, his pronouncements about Greek tragedy and poetics, and the rereading of the classical dramas in the recent performance turn in scholarship. So Aristotle's Poetics, the earliest surviving work of dramatic criticism, is often and wrongly assumed to present the rules for tragic performance. The simple fact is, not all extant tragedies fit the Aristotelian mold. Not all tragedies, for instance, have lofty heroes with fatal flaws, or endings that evoke fear and pity. Some tragedies focus absurdly on lesser sufferers. Greek tragedies also teem with inconsistencies of character and unbelievable amounts of coincidence. The modernists of French neoclassicism and German Romanticism had a go to correct such embarrassments and came up with even worse results. The problem is that Aristotle drew his principles during a period when the star actor, who cherry-picked the best bits of tragedy, was in the ascendant, and complex performance styles during the heyday of Athenian tragedy were in decline. The chorus, possibly the most distinctive aspect of the ancient genre, is almost entirely omitted from Aristotle's lectures, apart from a persistent misapprehension, now firmly embedded in modern practice, that the chorus should be treated as one of the actors. In the current reading of Greek tragedy, performance studies has played a key role in unseating text and authorial intentions as the key approach to Greek tragedy. So practitioner voices such as Timberlake Württemberger, Blake Morrison, and the choreographer director Stuart Leslie have prompted fresh perspectives on the songful and dance-like structures embedded in the ancient text. In the same vein, modern directors including Minushkin, Mitchell, Terzopoulos, Gruber train their actors to respond viscerally and less logocentrically to the demands of the performance art. Within classical studies, scholars show us complex musical structures. There's William Scott's study of Aeschylean and Sophoclean theater, A.M. Dale's metrical analysis. They confirm the inextricable function of rhythmic structures which give tragedy its musical and symphonic infrastructure. Essentially, the ancient tragedian was a composer, setting words, music, and dance together to create the successive feelings within the course of the drama. In relation to the early example in Oedipus, the feminist classicist Nicole Leroux describes the strain in language found in the comus as the cry of cries, materialized in generic vocal emissions. These words, these texts, are born out of a performance craft, not writing craft, and therefore demand from the actor an alertness and sensitivity to its sonic canvas. More interestingly is the convergence of classical studies with performance studies. And what broke ground was Oliver Taplin's volumes The Stagecraft of Aeschylus in 1977 and Greek Tragedy in Action in 1978. I think some of you are probably quite familiar with Oliver Taplin's books. These studies highlighted the craft and scenographic structures lying beneath and through the lines of the play. For Taplin, the text is no more than a transcript, a scenario, signpost to a deeper reality where voice, timbre, and physicality connect the reader to the felt play. The theater historian and classicist David Wiles further challenges the privileging of the psychological actor in the face of ancient evidence. The construct of the ancient actor, far different from our own modern sense, would not easily have separated the concept of outward thought and inner feeling. On the contrary, ancient actors and spectators understood the gods to regularly operate through humans. And so it made no sense to think of actions being rooted in an autonomous ego. Similarly, the ancient chorus affected a full range of extraordinary meta-theatrical significations, states of alterity, rhythmic and acoustical sensations. It is therefore somewhat unhelpful to characterize the chorus as some oddly 19th century ideal spectator, dutiful friend, and worse yet, an operatic ensemble. Choruses don't show audiences what to think or feel. Neither do they simply mirror dramatic events. They embody a range of expressions that are instantiated through the actions and feelings of the protagonist. They are literally, and this is me, the breathing machine of the entire play. Given the performance-turning classical studies and the incredible global afterlife of Greek tragedy and all its cross-cultural and cross-disciplinary treatments, we ought not hear Aristotle mentioned as frequently as we do in the rehearsal space. My sense is Aristotle cannot be validated without the overarching presence of Stanislavski-based thinking. That is, when the literary text is deemed to represent the source of truth in our preparatory work, we tend to instantly go searching, Oedipus-like, for the driving logos of the character in the words and dramatic circumstances, and overlook affective devices underpinning them. We will even put our immediate trust in modern-day adapters. So, whether filtered through the textbook poetry of Robert Fagles, the muscular poetry of Ted Hughes, or the explosive expressionism of Sarah Kane, the words in hand constitute effectively the playing score in the room. Additionally, the habit which aligns Stanislavski-based principles of given circumstances, magic ifs, objectives to such classical texts, may lie in the juxtaposition of classical actor training and the classical canon. So much so that in every high school, college, or conservatory, there has been no reason to separate out the classical actor training curriculum and the classical literature that feeds it. Thus, the actor's blueprint, which links Aristotle and Stanislavski, appear in nearly all introductory texts on how to approach Greek tragedy. So, there's nothing wrong, by the way, about mentioning Aristotle and Stanislavski in the same breath. What is interesting is why it defaults in those positions. What's it doing there? So I'm just going to point out a couple of books that sort of do this, and this, like I said, it's just sort of a regular thing that happens. So Jean Benedetti's book, Robert Blumenfeld's book, Preparatory Instructions Regarding Classical Texts, Given Circumstances of Time and Place, Natural Disposition of the Characters, Logical Sequence of Plots, etc., which are passing nod to Aristotle's pronouncements. In French and Bennett's Experience Stanislavski Today, 2016, we are told that every Greek play combines in some proportion all of Aristotle's components. Malcolm Morrison in Classical Acting begins promisingly when he states, that ancient tragic dramas have unique qualities that require a different style of acting. Yet, for Morrison, it is what characters do and think, and not any of the underlying formal musical or performance structures that to him instantiates the essential deeper truth of the play. Graham Lay's recently Acting Greek Tragedy, 2015, also offers actors insights into character based on structural analysis of the text, and leaves behind any fuller embodiment of the characters through any kind of psychophysical work. Prompted by Aristotelian dramaturgy, Robert Cohen, on the right, Acting 1, Acting 2, perceives the chorus and Oedipus both as willful characters in competition for applause and approbation. Oedipus should try to, quote, humiliate his rival, to, quote, impress the citizenry, and for the chorus to feel free, quote, to murmur sounds of encouragement. Nothing illogical or insensible about these directives, apart from the fact that the psychologistical work is conducted in a vacuum of the possible rhythmic and sonic affects which underpin these moments. Now, I've not come to bury Aristotle or Stanislavski or to go over debates which are possibly all too familiar with you. My truck in rehearsal rooms is this. When actors start to think and do Greek tragic characters as modern personas, it habituates the imagination, observation, and emotional faculties in what it supposedly feels natural or real. While we may want our hubristic Oedipus or risk-averse Theban elder to look and sound a bit like us, it is possible that a whole range of potential sounds and sensations may be absented in bringing these remarkable characters to life. And for this to happen, we need to work and recalibrate the holistic continuum implied in psychophysical work. In this case, specifically to enact the moment when the logocentric acting principle, the knowledge of intention and circumstance, gives way or ruptures into sonic sensations, to manifest, as Nicole Leroux said, the cry of cries. So, what I'd like to do is return to this moment, the cathartic meltdown. My question is this: what convergence of acting approaches might be possible to create physical and sonic effects? How might the performance contain the energy of the other, so you sense the true counterpoint in the exchange of physical and psychological actions, so that the experience of the comus is a shared event, of what I call polyphonic and polykinetic engagement with the text, rather than simply a heightened and hysterical psychological moment, no matter how keenly and truthfully felt. So, in the time remaining, I think I've got about, what, four or 5 minutes?
You do, exactly.
Okay, good. I'd like to talk about my emerging approaches. The challenge this shows me as a musician in the room, and how do I cope with this? And I draw mostly from my acting through song kind of techniques which I use in music theater, and also from several theoretical practical resources. The underlying principles of what I would do in a situation like this are the following. Breath ignites imagination, sound, and movement. I didn't invent that. We've seen Linklater's kind of sequence of events which leads one to use breath to the text. I use first the text in textual analysis as a kind of beginning, but I leave the text, I develop the sonic and movement sensations through improvisation, and then I come back to text. I apply pathos and empathy, or empathos, the idea that one is lamenting and the other holds the lament and then shows the empathetic counterpoint to it. And my aim is that it becomes polyphonic and polykinetic, so there's an interrelationship in the actors. Of course, Stanislavski was absolutely prescient and very insightful in his understanding of musicality, and this has already been talked about ad infinitum, and I just point out several, cherry pick so many things out of building a character that's in there that shows his understanding of that. And in convergence of contemporary methods, my God, I don't have to invent the wheel. People are so full of knowledge and already giving you this stuff. So when I land in the room, for instance, my top bits up here are this sort of very close at hand. I've got the Berlin tool book. Richard Panet's book, The One Breath, One Thought, One Action. I'll show you how I use that idea. Stanislavski. I also, the idea of action verbs is used a lot in acting through song, so I'm going to show how I use that. Of course, the idea of breath and voice incorporates a lot of the great work that's been done around classical acting training and voice studies. And of course, it's Roddenberry, Linklater. Jane Boston's book on breath and action is also a terrific primer for me. And down here, of course, are the integrationists. Lugering, Gutekins and John's book, which I think was a terrific kind of integration of Stanislavski and voice work. Moni Yakim, for me also, the idea of using points of the body to express breath and imagination. And Zinder, who also incorporates Chekhov techniques. It's not that I go and absolutely pilfer all this material, but I find that when I start to talk and do my work, I find that these people are in the room already with me. In fact, have articulated probably better than I have. So I'm just showing that the legacy is already in the room. Okay, so if we look at this just a second, this is, I'm just going to come off script a second here. The choral ode starts here. This is sort of second episode, and you see that the elder chorus is just sort of here, containing Creon. That is just one line here, but most of it in between is the stichomathea between Creon Oedipus. What I call is that sort of the energy is ratcheting up. It ruptures around here, and then it goes into this shared lament, this kind of other sound and feeling and sensation in the room. But note that the comus is a very symmetrical, almost binary text. It's not natural. It's not natural, is it? So it is songful. So how do you honor this moment? And notice that the elder builds into bigger lines across and then ends the moment with Oedipus, and then there's a moment with Oedipus Creon, and then the exact same symmetry happens with Jocasta. How do you do this? Musically, sonically, so it makes sense both psychologically, but also on that kind of meta-theatrical canvas. So this is what I do. I do a lot of preparation work. All the characters, intentions, and given circumstances are in play. There is a lot of this. Sophocles particularly is a very structural. I sort of liken him to Beethoven. I mean, you can really see the movements and why the choruses are there. I also convert the I want as the action verb, and I allow, for instance, each of the actors to just use one. Some people like using a whole plethora of them. I think by using one, it allows them to use one instrument. It's like a French horn, like an oboe, to use that verb and to show the hundreds of different colors and intonations and possibilities you can work through that one verb. So it's about playing with a possibility. It's not saying, this is your character, this is what you're going to want for this situation, but to give them an instrument to play with. And also that we're grafting things. So for instance, the chorus elder will not just invent things at the start. The chorus elder might use the material that's come from the choral ode. So it's being strung through to the comments. So you see kinds of that material reappearing. So step one, what I do is this idea of ghost speaking. I have an actor speak the line into the protagonist. So for instance, the protagonist and the elder might be Oedipus and the elder are sitting, watching each other, and the ghost speakers are just speaking the lines into their ear, and they just say the lines. It's almost a bit dropping in, but somebody else says it into your ear. And also that person creates a kind of sound score, and it's also just the action verb. So in fact, it's being given to the people. And all this is about is just to get a kind of layered sense of the structure. How does it feel that these lines go? How long is it? How am I present with this person? And that's it. It's just a surface rendering of the structure of the text. It's not about going deep into this. It's just hearing how it lies in the sound. And then this is the important moment here. This will take about a day or two. What I have to do is that the elder here, the ghost speaker will say the line to the elder. What the elder starts to do is a signature breath on the thought. It could just be anything. It kind of, he says it, he goes to the breath. It is just the sound, the physics of the breath. What happens with Oedipus and Jocasta is they actually absorb and watch and also feel the breath at the same time. They hold the breath with the person. They feel it. They're not mimicking it. They're trying to understand what that signature is. I invite then the actor to use open vowels, any that comes out, like oh, anything that is there available in their psyche. I'll also invite, where would you like it from? The heart, here, or the pelvis? I usually just use 3. I mean, you can use 6 or 7, but I think those are nice places to just keep it clean. And then I invite gestures to go along with it. What I then do with the actor is that I clarify it based on these. Ignition, the onset of breath, is it fast, is it slow, is it sudden, is it drawn from another source? The melos, how long is it? Where does it rise? Where does it fall? And where does it cadence? How does it end? Where's the silence at the end of the breath? Particularly the silence. Once that starts to happen, then I have Oedipus, Jocasta, and the elder dance these actions into space. So they actually are sharing and throwing breath to each other. So they all share the lines. I will only work with 1 or 2 lines, pairings at a time. I won't do the whole thing. I'll just get maybe that sensation and relationship. At the end, what happens is then the protagonists are allowed to do a counterpoint version. They hold the energy and the material, and then they sort of propose a counterpoint to that. So what starts to happen is you get a kind of pathy and antipathy, or the pathos and the antipathy, as I just mentioned. And then it just, again, I sort of dance this through the room to a point that they all understand this kind of dance of breath, of sound, of energy that they do with each other. As far as the words dropping in, what I start to do is, okay, we start to drop the text in and just let it explode into the sonic space and not to judge it, just to hear where the word is difficult on the breath, where it feels traumatic, and just to observe it. I find that when I work with students particularly, they'll start to become semantic someday and leave behind everything. I go back to the sonic physical exercise and keep the canvas rich constantly. and don't allow the text to kind of crystallize into meaning yet. Because for me, the comus is a special. Okay, so the comus is a special event of sound, and it must be generate a distinct affective sensation, unlike the stichometry or dialogical passage. It must go into another place. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. So I'm just going to say this really quickly. I'm new to Stanislavski. I mean, I'm not going to apologize about that. But for some reason, every time I apply musicality to whatever I do, Stanislavski seems to be the messenger in the room, constantly with this kind of prescient sort of talking to me. And even here, it almost one could say tantalize you with the idea that perhaps Greek tragedy and Aristophanes and various things might have been also part of the experimentation outside opera and other things he's done. Good. So there it is.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Three terrific talks. And Zachary's piece here, as good as the one he did on musical theatre last year, which was very, very exciting equally. So thank you for introducing a whole new line. We have 5 minutes before Andre has to speak, but maybe just take one question. Do you have any questions?
It's not so much a question, thank you very much, Zachary, as a suggestion. Are you aware of Peter Stein's production of the Oresteia?
Yes, yeah, quite.
Because the business you're talking about here, of the musicality of the sounds,
yeah.
The structure of the word, the sequence of the action, the formal organization of movement, is, I think, very well pursued by Stein in that production.
Yeah.
And this combination of Stanislavski with what else you've been talking about here.
Yeah.
What do you think of it then? You've seen the
Yes, and thank you for pointing that out. I think in a deeper reflection, when I look at my legacy, I will go, oh, well, Stein has already actually put that together.
Mm.
And others have done the same thing in various kinds of emphasis. But yeah, I just have yet to do this survey of
it's
what's
just
out
interesting
there.
because what's particularly interesting too about Stein is that he knows ancient Greek.
Yeah, yeah.
He worked with the Greek text. His actors were Russian, so he worked with Russian because he speaks Russian.
Yeah.
Stein is an amazing director.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And of course, he also had to work through German. So that the polyphony that you're talking about here also came through in the verbal training because of the as Bakhtin would say, the accents or the overtones of other languages.
Yes, yes. Well, thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, I'll
It might be
definitely
worth
do that.
revisiting.
The great thing about Stein is that he actually created this alternative to the kind of more Oxbridge
Yes,
kind of national
absolutely.
theatre way of looking at text. Yeah.
Maybe whilst we, maybe just one, did you want to ask something?
What,
Yeah,
during the
please.
transition?
No, why don't you ask it, and then
All right.
Andre, if you want to start up for yourself.
So mine isn't actually a question, it's in the spirit of the symposium. It was my inner monologue in response to your paper. I was thinking of that sort of high five between the two characters that you referred to at the beginning. And what occurred to me is that part of that high five, it seems, is too narrow an understanding of what Stanislavski can be. And I was thinking of Andrew Sofer, who wrote a book called Dark Matter, Theater and Invisibility. And he talks about dark matter as the material that's invisible that actually holds something that we see together. And without that dark matter, it doesn't make sense.
Yes.
And the dark matter of Stanislavski is the theater culture of which he was a part, where there was massive experimentation. There were calls for return to the Greeks. There were calls for return to Shakespeare. And the other important dark matter in Stanislavski's own career is his experimentation with symbolism. It was out of his experimentation with symbolism. It was out of his, controversial Hamlet with Gordon Craig. It was out of his symbolist Bluebird that the system was born. Out of this actually ancient Greek idea that there's a real truth that lies behind our everyday truth. And I feel like those early experiments were an attempt to access that deeper truth, not the surface of everyday truth.
That's excellent. So I'll
pick up on that afterwards. Very good. Thank you very much.